Good day. Kathy Mortensen here with Our Shared Humanity. And I'm going to strive to get the two videos in this week about forgiveness. It's been difficult. Challenges have come up both collectively and personally. So I might speak with a little more passion today because of where I'm at. And I want to be honest and acknowledge that. We're on the line of the prayer, forgive us this day. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And the previous video about this also contains the words that I'm going to begin with. But I left the previous video with this role of harm. And so I want to talk about some deep concepts about forgiveness today because we're all going to be touched by what's happening collectively, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. So I'm going to begin. Forgive us this day our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. This prayer does not imagine forgiveness as like this symmetrical or mutual endeavor. If you're a person who's been harmed, forgiveness, if it ever comes, is an inner binding that restores your agency, your dignity, and it may never involve the one who caused harm. Now, if you're one who has caused harm, you don't get to claim forgiveness. You can't request it or expect it. It only becomes possible through accountability, the willingness to face what was done, to accept consequence, and to untangle all the conditions that made the harm possible. It's a lot of work. Dignity is not withdrawn from those who refuse to do this work. And yet, this energy, this concept, this intention of forgiveness does not approach you if you refuse to do the work. Why? Because the hurt of the violated is never subordinated to the comfort of the violator. There's a lot there. And underneath that, as you listen to this video and the one I produce, hopefully within the next 2 days, because I'm going to talk more about this in the next video, but I want to plant a seed here of thinking. Some of us feel that we're responsible for saving democracy, no matter what side of the aisle on. We're not responsible for saving democracy. I'm responsible for helping people not disappear while living inside whatever system we're working in. I feel a great need to save democracy. For me, the fear that has come up inside is that democracy is gone. And as I touch that grief of losing what I got to experience in my life and that my grandchildren are going to have to fight for, I'm accepting I'm not responsible for saving democracy. What I am doing is learning to trust relational wisdom. this relational wisdom that Jesus embodied without turning harm into something holy. When both sides of the aisle are saying we're saving democracy by turning harm into something holy, we're forgetting relational wisdom. Because the wisdom of Jesus, he did not collapse forgiveness and consequence. He allowed both of those existence. If there was harm, there's a consequence. He did not collapse mercy and truth. Those individuals who were harmed and those who harmed both got mercy. Truth was not collapsed to provide mercy only to one side. Relational wisdom, shared humanity, and responsibility. Forgiveness embraces both, that everyone is human and everyone is responsible. You know, his wisdom places these things, these concepts that we live through, forgiveness and consequence, mercy and truth, humanity and responsibility, in right relationship. What does that mean? There's a lot of talking to get to the depth of Jesus' wisdom about right relationship, whether you believe in God or not. So let's break some of those down. What is right relationship? It's about relational wisdom, not rule keeping, although rule keeping is an undertone. It's part of it. I'm not claiming there's a perfect doctrine for a walk of faith or a walk of humanity. And when we don't claim perfect doctrine, we also are not claiming absolute certainty. We're also not claiming moral superiority. When Jesus moved in relationships with those who were persecuting him, I mean, he walked among Roman conquerors, Jewish leaders, spiritual leaders, priests. He walked through all the conflicts of the day, just like we're walking through all the conflicts of the day. When he moved in relationship, he strove to restore dignity, telling the truth, protecting the vulnerable, confronting exploitation, and interrupting cycles of harm. That's wisdom. That's judgment as discernment in service of life. That's what this last series has been about. Judgment. This work rejects this distortion about how we spiritually bypass. And how do we spiritually bypass? You know, spiritualizing harm is what happens when people say, oh, just forgive and move on. When we say everything happens for a reason. When my friend said to herself, it's been 3 years. I should be over this by now. When we say, oh, don't be bitter. Oh, love your enemies. Everything happens for a reason. Guess what? Jesus never said that. He never told the oppressed, your suffering is spiritually good for you. I realize the story of Job offers that kind of thinking, but I want to get to some more depths of this thinking, this certainty that suffering is spiritually good. Jesus never told someone who was abused, your job is to endure it. He never told those in power, oh, no repair is needed. What I'm sharing is the relational wisdom I've learned through the Lord's Prayer and deep, deep study in following Jesus' way of love and repair without turning harm into something sacred, necessary, or untouchable. There's huge theology underneath all of this. What Jesus taught is protecting both compassion and justice. When we can protect both compassion and justice, we're making room for that grief. When my friend said, it's been 3 years since my husband passed away. It should be easier. I should be over it. We're making room for anger. I'm angry that someone died for what they believed in. It makes room for protest and consequences and accountability. But it also makes room for dignity, mercy, and if you remember the two paths, restoration where possible. It's not always possible. So, this love does not require us to pretend in positivity that harm is holy. Forgiveness does not require calling injustice good. I'm talking about a reverence for all of life and a refusal to collude with harm. That's a judgment that protects life. That's intention that serves dignity, love that stays embodied. This is compassion that does not collapse. Compassion can get fatigued. It's okay to say, I just can't handle this today. I have compassion for myself. That's compassion. Take a break. Spiritualizing harm is one of the fastest ways humans lose their aliveness, their agency, and their moral clarity. You know the song I sang as a young child, Onward Christian Soldiers, Marching Off to War. There's something to that. I'm not here to soften Jesus. I'm here to take what he taught seriously enough to refuse the distortions of what he taught. I'm being faithful to the way he moved in the world. When we say this line of the prayer, it does not promise resolution. It's training our judgment to stay honest without becoming cruel. and compassionate without becoming permissive. Forgiveness is never used to bypass justice. Dignity is never used to erase harm. I can treat with dignity those who hurt me, but it's not going to erase the harm I feel within. Humanity should never be used as an excuse. Dignity belongs to everyone. Forgiveness belongs only where truth and responsibility are willing to meet. Those two paths of forgiveness. The paradox of life takes on so many roles. When I say dignity belongs to everyone, and forgiveness belongs only where truth and responsibility are willing to meet, I'm protecting survivors. I want to stop the misuse of forgiveness, and I want to preserve what's important to me. Jesus consistently separated forgiveness from accountability. And I feel like one of the most overlooked features of Jesus' relational wisdom, what he taught about having relationship with all of life, is that he does not erase consequence when he forgives. What he does is he forgives sin. He names harm. He demands change, and he allows separation. We're allowed to separate from those that harm us. When he said to the woman who committed adultery, go and sin no more, it wasn't sentimental. It was oriented in judgment. Why was it oriented in judgment? Because it noticed the harm was real. It noticed that in the law and order of the day and between relationships, responsibility exists. It noticed that forgiveness does not restore life as it was. Forgiveness never replaces the demand for transformation. He died on the cross. He died on the cross to show us the way to transform. We need judgment, discernment to help us determine whether transformation is occurring. The other thing Jesus did was he refused to force reconciliation. Jesus never commanded victims to reconcile with those who refuse repentance. He taught boundary-based separation in his words. He said words like, if they will not listen, treat them as outsiders. If they will not listen, treat them as outsiders. He also said, shake the dust from your feet. Don't carry that with you. Separate yourself from it. He also said, leave, flee, do not stay. These are not failures of love. They are judgments in service of dignity and protection. Dignity is not withdrawn from those who refuse accountability. but forgiveness is not approaching them. Jesus did not coerce this personal relationship. He used relational wisdom. He used judgment to discern when relationships in life would violate life itself. When Jesus teaches forgiveness, he uses this metaphor. And it's almost always debt, not emotion, not reconciliation, not virtue. So these debt metaphors imply asymmetrical. Things don't look alike. These debt metaphors imply what's the real cost? A deeper cost to relationship. His debt metaphors looked at the relationships that happen when there's a power imbalance. And his debt metaphors structured our responsibility. So, debt forgiveness, when we talk about debt, DEBT, we get debts. We get in, we have a surplus or a debit. Debt forgiveness does not mean debt never existed, that harm didn't matter, or that the debtor is absolved without reckoning. It means the creditor is no longer bound to the debt. So sometimes we can't unbind the harm. I shouldn't say that. We can unbind the harm. But there are moments where, because when Jesus says, it's okay if you can't totally forgive someone, he doesn't expect that reconciliation. He's also implying when we're unbinding the harm, we don't need the perpetrator's response. We don't have to rely on them transforming. So what I've learned in this endeavor of judgment, as it aligns with forgiveness, is that we need to judge before we can forgive. And there's a lot to uncover here because Jesus also said, judge not lest you be judged. But this judgment and these paths of judgment and the depth of understanding judgment in relational wisdom, Jesus is insisting that we see clearly before we act, that we remove the log in our own eye before we address the speck in another person. That, even when it comes to teachers like me, that we discern the fruit of what we're teaching before we trust them. That we use judgment to recognize wolves in religious clothing. Those are all judgmental practices that he's asking us to use Forgiveness that bypasses this kind of discernment is not praised in relational wisdom. Being naive is not holy. When we can discern, this is the kind of judgment that prevents forgiveness from becoming erasing ourself, diminishing who we are. This is the kind of judgment that prevents mercy from becoming complicit. I'm reading about a lot of complicity going on. Who's complicit? As all these actions and deaths are happening within our country. That's a deep thought. Mercy. Jesus wants to prevent mercy. Oh God, give me mercy for what I've done wrong from becoming complicit. Oh, it's okay. That is justified. Jesus taught this discernment is that compassion, we need to prevent compassion from protecting harm. In this role with forgiveness, here's where, in the depths of learning, Jesus treats the willingness to be judged as a mark of truth. And if I didn't say this in my last video, I meant to. I know I've said it publicly and to friends. I there's something about being around those who've been through recovery. There's such a willingness to be judged, and it's not taken personally. They're doing some of this work. Jesus treats the willingness to be judged as a mark of truth. Look in his teachings, how he consistently honors those who confess, how he consistently honors those who repent, how he consistently honors those who accept consequence. And what does he also do? He consistently confronts those who deflect, those who justify, those who weaponize mercy. And oh, here we go again. My phone does its thing and it skips up, and now I have to go back down. I so apologize. Okay, did he demand separation? I did. Thank you for waiting. I so appreciate it. Because I can't keep all these concepts in my brain without notes. He confronts those who demand exemption. So let me say that again since there was such a long pause. Jesus consistently confronts those who deflect, who justify, who weaponize mercy, and who demand exemption. So accountability for him wasn't about punishment. It was about opening the possibility of a gateway for restoration, if restoration is ever possible. That's why in Jesus' teachings, in his relational wisdom, He referred to those who wanted to be held accountable as being near the realm of forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because they are participating in truth. When we participate in that depth of level of truth, we're all dignified. We're participating in transformation. Jesus' words, when I said earlier, judge not, they're not a ban on discernment. When he says judge not, he's condemning the hypocritical judgment. He's condemning the self-exempting judgment. He's condemning the hierarchy and ranking judgment. I'm better than you because I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins and you don't. He's condemning the kind of judgment that erases dignity. In other places in the Bible, Jesus commands judgment this way: judge rightly. So judgment's role is not elimination, it's purification. Judgment's role is transforming. Judgment is what keeps forgiveness from being premature. If we haven't healed enough to forgive, why are we expected to? From being coerced. Say you're sorry. Hmm. How does that help you transform? Okay, I'm sorry. To be weaponized. And more deeply, judgment is what keeps forgiveness from being selectively applied. So I know in this video I'm going to repeat a few things, and that's okay. I think it's important because they're deep concepts. Jesus never treats forgiveness as pretending harm didn't happen. He consistently names harm as real. He calls hypocrisy hypocrisy. He calls exploitation wrong. He calls abuse of power corrupt. And he calls betrayal betrayal. If you think of the story of Zacchaeus, I remember the song, Zacchaeus, please come down. You know, Zacchaeus exploited people. He didn't say, it's okay, you're loved. Of course you're loved, but you need accountability. Jesus responded to Zacchaeus by asking for repayment and restoration. And Zacchaeus was able to respond and respond with repayment and restoration. That's justice. Forgiveness in that story in Luke 19 leads to material repair, but not emotional bypass. When religious leaders crush people with law, Jesus confronts them. That's not avoidance. That's moral clarity. Forgiveness in Jesus is never let's move on without consequence. It's closer to let's move forward in a way that restores life instead of multiplying harm. I have so much to say about forgiveness. I apologize if it's wordy and so far and so deep. We all want to live in a world that's simple and easy to understand. I want to live in a world that's more truthful and honest and recognizes every human with dignity, but with accountability. Accountability to restore life rather than multiplying harm. May you have some ponderings with forgiveness today. May you accept wherever you are and whatever path you're on in a forgiveness journey as being true for you. May you approach forgiveness with relational wisdom and keep diving in through the harm, through being more of who you really are. More to come. Namaste.